at any time, and we can get back to the conversational side of it. Is it affecting buyers? I'm seeing the fourth quarter as being a fairly typical fourth quarter, where we are seeing buyers that are trying to close deals before the end of the year to lock in their depreciation for the year, and as is always the case, bonus depreciation. It's not that much different, maybe a little bit more active than in prior years. I think there may be some fear that bonus depreciation may not survive a new administration, but that remains to be seen. Time is running out. It is November, and it is 11/11. That's Veterans Day, and I'd like to acknowledge that for all the veterans that we have on are in town hall today, and for those who are not, and particularly those who served but are still suffering. But the time is running out. It is 11/11, and it is the 11th hour for trying to get a deal closed this year. There's just not that much time left to actually get a deal closed between going through an LOI process, getting a purchase agreement signed, working with an inspection facility, finding a slot, getting them to do the work, getting the remediation done, and then leaving a little bit of time at the end of the year to get in those business flights that you want to take for bonus depreciation. There really isn't that much time left. So, inventory is tight. I mean, there's a decent amount of inventory out there, but the level of quality inventory seems to be, it's just not there. I've got one customer that's on their fourth LOI right now, trying to make a deal. So it is tough. We're talking about things to watch during the lame duck session. As Tim pointed out, it looks like the Republicans have a pretty good chance of hanging on to the Senate. Right now, they've got 50, assuming that Alaska stays Republican, as everyone expects, even though that's not finalized yet. The Democrats have 48. There are two runoff elections in Georgia, which could bring it to a 50-50 tie, which would give effective control of the Senate to the Democrats, with a tie-breaking vote with Vice President Harris, Vice President-elect Harris. So I think how the Senate goes is going to play a large part in what a Biden administration looks like and how much they're able to do. How different will a Biden administration look from a Trump administration? And then as far as the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is concerned, how different would it look from a Bernie Sanders administration? I think with, as Tim alluded, this is not a landslide. It may be a mandate for Biden over Trump, but I don't think this is a mandate for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So the ability to make sweeping changes may be limited. How far left will they be able to go is just not clear. And will they be able to get anything done? And will they be able to get anything done outside of executive orders? Is a really good question. I think a big question during the lame duck session is, will we see more stimulus relief? Every economist that I've heard has said that it's absolutely critical that we get a further relief package and more money pumped into the economy. How we're ultimately going to pay for all this, I don't know, but right now that's what's needed. And will anything happen during the lame duck session? Because people seem to be taking sides on the outcome of the election now rather than on policy changes. So we'll see. That remains to be seen. Thoughts on taxation and bonus depreciation going forward? I spoke with Scott O'Brien at NBAA, who's kind of their tax policy liaison with the Hill. They're not expecting big changes when it comes to bonus depreciation. I went in and looked at the Biden tax platform on his website. I couldn't even find a mention of the word bonus depreciation in their public-facing statements on tax. So right now, We've got 100% bonus depreciation. We've got it for this year and for the next 2 years. This was one of the phase-out type of tax changes. So beginning in January of 2023, bonus depreciation phases out 20% per year until it's gone. Historically, we've seen that Congress has stepped in and restored bonus depreciation as it was phasing out. So just don't know what's going to happen there. I think there's always a risk that in trying to make the tax code more progressive, to try to rescind some of the tax benefits that were deemed to be too friendly to upper income earners, that it's possible that aircraft could get singled out for special treatment and have bonus depreciation rescinded for aircraft, because we've seen our industry be the target in the past. So that's something to keep an eye on. But again, nothing in the Biden platform that would indicate that's one of their objectives. Just overall tax changes. If you look at the Biden platform, they're talking about a corporate tax increase from 21% back up to 28% prior to the Trump Tax Act. Changes in capital gains treatment so that capital gains would be treated as ordinary income to the extent that the taxpayer has over $1 million in income, and raising individual tax rates from for the highest bracket from 37% back up to 39.6% where it was before the Trump changes. I went on the Tax Foundation's website, which is generally considered to be kind of centrist to more conservative leaning, and their analysis of what this would mean for the economy was that they're seeing a 1.62 drop in gross domestic product, and the overall maybe a net job loss, but nothing too dramatically negative there. So higher rates actually make deductions more valuable. So if rates go up, deductions become more valuable because they have a bigger impact on your return. But higher rates are generally not considered to be business friendly or good for growth. So just don't know what a Biden tax administration is going to look like.
Okay.
Yes. Hey, Alistair.
Great. I'll talk quickly. We've got a question that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Ryan DeMoore at Satcom Direct is going, if bonus depreciation is killed, will that merely be a flesh wound for the recovery, or would that be a blow to the jugular?
Probably somewhere in between. It's certainly not going to kill it. We all get calls where people saying, I got to buy an airplane, I got to buy it this year, I want the bonus depreciation. And I think when a lot of taxpayers really get down to, and I'm starting to get calls now from people that are doing their returns and audits and finding out that bonus depreciation wasn't as valuable as they thought it was. So I think it's more, it plays into the psyche of the buyer more than it'll hurt. It'll be a hit, but it's not a death knell.
Great. Question from Jeremy Cox. Any thoughts on Kamala Harris becoming president?
Well, personally, I think she could use a little more seasoning, and hopefully she gets the opportunity to get that executive experience that so far is lacking.
Okay, very quick question from Jacob Emerson. Can you just explain quickly the current tax benefits for prospective aircraft buyers, especially first-timers?
Yeah, well, the big one is bonus depreciation, and I want to point out, and I think this kind of gets lost every once in a while, that bonus depreciation applies to any capital asset that you buy, not just aircraft. So it's not a business aircraft benefit that it is targeted to an industry. It is a benefit that's targeted to spur capital investments across across the board, all sorts of assets. So what it does is it allows you to, assuming that the business aircraft is used in fact for business, if it's used 100% of the time for business purposes, you can depreciate and deduct 100% of the cost of that aircraft in the year of.
Hey, Messenger. Jay, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
I'm just glad it's working, and delighted to have you as well. So we've seen this mad dash to the end of the year. Is it going to be a quiet first quarter in 2021?
Well, good. Let's talk about airplanes now. I think that it is always a quieter first quarter after a frenzy in the fourth quarter. I don't think that the quieter first quarter is going to be indicative actually of policy or politics. I think it's just going to be more indicative of people knowing that to qualify and to conform for bonus depreciation and having 12 months to do it is a much more challenging quest than having weeks to do it in the last part of the year. So I think the natural order of things is a quieter first quarter. If I could just add a couple of things when I was listening to Ed talk about tax planning, so often the calls that we get are sort of started with cocktail party tax planning discussions, where one high net worth individual is standing next to a friend and hearing about how they're doing it, and so they feel they want to do it. But the reality is it's a very complicated, complex process, and I also think that though it drives a lot of the beginning conversations about buying planes, and especially at this period of the year, at the end of the day, it's really not the reason people buy airplanes. And I think they buy airplanes to get around safely, get out ahead of their competition in front of their customers. So anyway, I'll leave another question to you if you have one.
Yeah, sure. So it looked like the Senate was going to turn, and now it looks like it isn't. What effect will that have on business aviation?
Well, I think if it had any effect at all, it'll probably keep tax benefits and tax where it is, because I don't think it's just going to be something that can go in and change. So I think that will be good for business aviation. I think business aviation is on a very solid footing right now, politics aside. And, it's an interesting statistic, and I've had this on my desk since January 3rd of 2020, when I was wondering really last year in December why it felt like there were fewer transactions. Actually, 2019, there were in many quarters fewer transactions. But interestingly enough, in 2017, retail jet transactions in December, there were 405 of them. In 2018, business jet transactions in December of 2018, there were 427. And in 2019, so coming up a year ago in December, business jet transactions were 256. So we were already seeing as an industry a downturn in transactions. 2020, I have to say that for us, and Steve, I'll bet you could echo this, 2020 has been one of our best years, and we had a 3.5-4 month period where there were no transactions. So to have accomplished what we've accomplished in an 8-month year rather than a 12-month year is pretty exciting. And when people then ask, what does that mean in terms of, will that kind of demand mean that prices will go up on airplanes? What's missing is almost a complete retreat of corporate buying and corporate transactions. So what's happening now is it's high net worth individuals, small corporation owners, buying planes, acting on a conversation that many of them had with me in March, April, and May, where they said, I'm never going to get on a commercial airliner again. And it was cheap talk, in my opinion, at that time. But now, starting in June, people are acting on it. And we've never been as busy buying planes for first-time buyers. And it's exciting. And what that's led to, of course, is, well, because of the corporate side retreating, it doesn't create so much demand that prices are going up. Hopefully that will balance out in 2020 and people will get out of a lockdown mode, the corporations, and also the optics of having to let so many people go and close so much of their businesses that they were just not feeling good about buying planes. But they'll get back out again and travel around the world and get to Europe and get to Asia and get to the Middle East. and we'll start to see that segment of our business pick up. But inventory, I think Ed said it, is challenging right now. There's still some great airplanes available, no question about that. But this activity right now is certainly cherry picking those with the best pedigree, best maintenance. It's making our job a bit harder.
Okay, great comments. Michael Christie at Untitled Chapter. I agree with you that bonus depreciation is not the preliminary driver of buying a plane. But how does he think the loss of the benefit over time will impact used values?
This is probably the first year that we've had as much discussion among buyers of bonus depreciation. Usually people come to us because of a need, because of a mission fulfillment, because of a desire and capability, and they weren't driven by it. I would bet that it'll be more conversation than it will be. The prior question about will it be a bump or be a go to the jugular, I think it's less than in the middle. I think it'll just get people back to the kind of depreciation that they've been used to, be it 5-year or 7-year, and you still be able to depreciate your airplane. I don't think it's going to really slow things down much.
Okay, changing from depreciation, Richard Berkemeyer is asking your thoughts on inventory. I know you've touched on that.
Well, we've still got some great inventory to sell, so Richard, call me after the show and I'll tell you what we've got. But I think it's when somebody comes to us, and Ed said it's 11/11, and so you have to put a dot on the calendar of when it's really too late to buy an airplane and put it in service this year. Really, the two longest poles in the tent is finding the equipment and then finding a space to inspect the equipment right now and have it all done by year end. It's more challenging. I think it's impossible to bring a plane in from out of the country, frankly, and get something done quickly. So for us here in North America, in the United States specifically, we look for inventory that's here. And that inventory is not as readily available in certain categories, small, mid-size, super mid-size airplanes. There's still some ultra long-range airplanes that are available because, frankly, with the corporate buying gone for the moment, those are the planes that have the least amount of activity. Although I've got a 650 in pre-buy. We closed 2 650s a month ago. We've got a 550 in pre-buy. So it's not over, but where you could use it is gone. And I think it's challenging for us right now. It's what I say to people that want to start today. It could take us the rest of the year just to find the right equipment. So you could never get it in service by the year end.
Question from Rodney Johnson at Tally Ho. Are we seeing more people selling aircraft or buying?
We're seeing more people. Well, for every buyer, there's a seller. So as our buying has picked up and acquisition.
I think, though, that in my few years in the business, what I would suggest is that the airplane business remains pretty consistent year over year, administration over administration. The need for private aircraft is not so much driven by who is the president of a given country at a given time, but it relates more to economies and it relates to need. And interestingly, if you looked at one of the JetNet pieces that was written just recently, the most popular airplanes right now, interestingly, are Citation 2s, Lear 35s, Hawker 800s, airplanes that began their development in the 1970s and the early 1980s. These are airplanes that are, that you could buy for $250,000, $500,000, and so, regardless of who the president is or will be, there's still a strong demand and a strong increasing demand for travel. And I think the high net worth individuals right now, like so many of us, are scared as hell. And, private aviation gives them an opportunity to travel again. So to answer your question about what's going to happen to the airplane business because we have a Democratic president, I don't see there going to be a tremendous difference. Now, we've spent a lot of time this morning also talking about bonus depreciation. And I think, frankly, to most people, that's a nice perk. But that's not going to be a driving determinant in going out and buying airplanes. Some of us who have been around long enough remember many years ago there was something called investment tax credit. The investment tax credit was unbelievable. If you bought a capital asset, you could take the price of that asset, and you had a 10% tax credit. A tax credit. Now, frankly, those were back in the days when the high-end airplane, a Gulfstream, was $5-6 million. So you got a $500,000 tax credit, but that was still substantial. And even though there was a lot of discussion about, well, when ITC goes away, the market's going to fall on its face, it didn't happen. It was still the demand and the need for executive travel. So I think that's, from my perspective, that's the byline of the election.
Okay. Great. And okay, so bear in mind that this is the post-election special. What else should we talk
about? Values. Where are values going to go?
Great. Where are values going to go?
I think in some cases they may stabilize or they may go up. Actually, I've heard anecdotal stories. Right now, Gulfstream 650s, Global 6000s, 550s are in high demand. Many of them are now under contract. Those are the ultra long range airplanes that people want to use. But I think that generally we're still going to be looking at typical depreciations of say 5 to 8% per year per model. I think it's going to be typical. Now, post 2008, we were running anywhere from 10 to 15% per year. So, and prior to 2008, most models were somewhere between 2 to 5% per year. But I think right now, if we get to a 5% per year depreciation on most models of airplanes, we should consider ourselves lucky. So, values, I think, are going to continue to soften somewhat. But and let's also remember that certain airplane types, like the Global Expresses and the 650s, the 650s, for instance, are right now at 50% of their original cost. Global 6000s are now sub $20 million airplanes on the early ones. So they're getting at a price point that people want. So where are values going to go? I think they're going to continue to soften, and I don't see any big bump in prices like we've seen pre-2008, and also from the early 1980s. There was a lot of price escalation. We'll never see those again.
What's your thought on new aircraft depreciation?
And I always have a hard time explaining this to people, but it's very akin to the drive it off the lot syndrome, and it becomes more exacerbated the higher the price of the airplane, because the ultra long range airplanes are built to a particular configuration, a particular standard. And as soon as I drive that off the lot, so to speak, the next guy is going to take issue with it. So as a general rule, I would say that the first year depreciation on most airplanes right now are probably 10 to 15%. Now, also with that said, historically, it had been that the 5-year mark, which is the big mark that everybody looks at, most airplanes have been about 75 to 80% of new price. Over the past few years, the average airplane is probably now about 55 to 60% at the 5-year mark. There have been a few airplanes that are at the 75, 80% mark, but those are few and far between. Almost every airplane right now, almost without exception, you could say is probably going to be about 55 to 60% at the 5-year mark. And I think it tends to be exaggerated with the more expensive airplanes.
Okay. Question from Richard Berkemeyer. Appraisers are swamped with work. Is that a sign that we expect bonus depreciation is gone January the 1st?
No, I don't see that. Listen, bonus depreciation, it only affects 2/3 of the marketplace. There's still a third of the marketplace internationally. They don't give a damn about the bonus depreciation. So we're very U.S. centric here in this country. And we think that whatever tax benefits or advantages we have or don't have are somehow going to affect the global economy for corporate aircraft. I frankly don't see it. And thank you for the question, Mr. Burkmeyer, because without a question from Richard Burkmeyer, I would just be boring him to death. So thank you, Richard.
One of the things this pandemic has shown is technology and moving to automated systems and virtual systems. Do we still need old-fashioned appraisers?
That's a really good question. There are, and as an appraiser, I fight with this every day. There are some appraisers who tout their ability to kick out an appraisal within 24 hours, and I don't know how you can do it. You can take algorithms all you want, but frankly, the best appraisers out there are the Jay Messengers and the Steve Varsanas of the world. And I'm not trying to say that to blow smoke, but they're in the market, they're in the pits every day, so they know what things are worth. I'm going to take an old adage, those who do and those who can't appraise, and I say that with a lot of pride. But I just, frankly, I don't know how the world of aircraft appraisals can be automated because, yes, many of the metrics that one would look at to appraise an airplane can be very subjectively quantified. But then you have other issues that require experience, and you can't apply values to them. Damage history, where the airplane's been, who's owned the airplane, maintenance history. Most of those you can't put a dollar figure to. So I think a good appraiser, which I'm struggling to be, you sort of have to step back, and you have to weigh everything, and you have to do that based on experience. And as much as I have respect for American Society of Appraisers and what they're attempting to do, I think one of the issues is that many people in the community are confusing expertise and certification with experience. And so if you're going to use a certificate to replace experience, you might have an issue there. So that's my feeling about where the appraisal business is.
Okay. And I'm looking for Richard's comments quickly, but I've missed them. We might move on now. That was great, Bob. Thanks so much.
No, thank you.
Actually, do you want to stay and say hi to your old colleague, Steve Vassani?
Yes, we're both getting old.
Speak for yourself.
Steve, how are you?
Hi, Al. How you doing? Very good. Thank you very much for having me.
Steve Vassani, Managing Director, the Jet Business in London. Steve, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about elections, or do you want to talk about vaccines?
I mean, I can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I want to make a couple of points on what I just heard. I thought there was a lot of interesting things which I confirm with a lot of guys have said previously. I do think as far as values, what Bob was saying, when you start seeing 50%, I think you're more around 7 years old rather than 5. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you start with these big numbers that the new airplanes and the longer range airplanes are, it's a big drop. And there was one G650 that sold for half price, but that was it. And the other ones are not half price. And out of about 30 650s that are for sale right now, about a third, 10 of them are under contract. So the market is very hot. And going back to values, I think as you go with airplanes that are a little bit older, not meaning old 20 years, but I mean saying 10 years old, I think you're going to see a real stabilization in those prices. And it's a combination of because of inventory definitely drying up a little bit, but also because of the compression of all the models that are underneath those airplanes. Because as you get down to this $10 to $20 million range of prices, there's so much underneath that these other airplanes really are going to get buoyed to stay above those numbers because, let's say if you have a G550, let's say, then you have a G5 under it, and a G450 or something, and a Global 6000, you have a XRS and you have a Classic Global. You could talk about a Falcon, 7X or a 900 LX and an EX Easy and an EX. There's all these different airplanes, except for obviously the newer ones, which don't have those earlier models like, the Phenom 300, the Legacy 500, underneath the Praetor. But most of these airplanes, I think you're going to see a stabilization in price, which is good for the market.
Question from Roger Noble at Arion. Is the recent demand for G650s and Global 6000 from potential investors or flippers due to current values?
They're definitely not flippers. Nobody's buying a G650 to flip. And quite frankly, it's rare to find any airplanes today being bought to flip. That's a dangerous game to play in this market today. So as far as why there's an increased demand, I think the prices have come down to a point where when you can compare if you want a G650 pre-owned or you want a new other ultra long range airplane, now you start comparing not that specific model to older ones. You're comparing that specific models to other models that could do the same, if not better, than what you want to buy.
Okay, another question from Nick Mahafti, another leading European broker. Do you see international-based aircraft as having a 50% drop in interest due to that hassle factor because of pre-buy, etc.? And therefore, do you have to put a bigger reduction in price on aircraft that are for sale not in the US?
Well, there's no question. I mean, listen, 60 or 70% of the acquisitions today are in the U.S. And it's obviously, if you have low-hanging fruit and you have a great opportunity that's a U.S. registered airplane based in the U.S., of course, you're going to go after that one first. But I really think that, the lack of inventory that has been occurring, you have to go outside the U.S. to see if there's anything else out there that might be a good deal. Obviously, pedigree of ownership, maintenance history, where it was based, wasn't hangared, if it was from maybe some country where you get a lot of salt and run on the runway in the wintertime, you have to look at. But I really don't think they're going to get drastically reduced. They have to be more competitive to give people a reason to come over there to look for them.
Okay, more questions. Question from Rodney Johnson at Tally Ho. Is there a real need for the ultra-long-range aircraft considering all the travel limitations in place?
Definitely. Listen, I understand. Listen, I'm based in London, and we obviously do not really focus on that small, mid-size range market. And, as Jay was saying, right now, I've got a 650 in pre-buy also, and we've sold 2 other 650s, and we have a G550 also in pre-buy, and another 550 going to be on the contract soon, next week. So, we had a Global XRS and a 900 EX Easy. All that's our market, and we're still staying, we got a great pipeline right now full, so I'm very happy about that. It wasn't like that, obviously, the second and third quarter. So, I know the U.S. has a limitation on travel. We have it here, but for some reason, we still have the activity level in that ultra long range market.
Okay, question from Sylvie Perron, co-editor of Ultimate Jet. What about online auctions for business jet aircraft in terms of setting a market price? Obviously, Stephen from Global ADX has also been on the town hall today.
Yeah, listen, I don't see that in the airplanes that are less than 10 years old. If you see an airplane like Bob was talking about, these $250,000, $300,000, $400,000, 30-year-old airplanes, possible those could end up there, but that's really, really stepping into quicksand. I mean, you're getting an airplane that is, you think you're getting a great deal for $300,000, and before you blink, you have a bill for $500,000 when you go into maintenance. So, be careful what you ask for.
Okay, question from Cameron Spencer at Flutter. Are your customers asking when will air taxis be ready?
Air taxis as in EV tolls?
I think so. Let's take it as eVTOLs and electric aircraft.
Listen, I don't think we're seeing clients, customers asking that question, but there's no question the momentum is picking up. I mean, I was listening on to your Revolution yesterday. I really do think that market is getting closer and closer to reality. And I'm not talking about the issues between technology being much quicker than regulatory issues, because, I'm always a believer that when the technology is there, it's going to get put to use. It might not be in New York, LA, London, but it will be put into a lot of places that don't really care about the regulatory and that don't have an infrastructure, like in Africa or Southeast Asia or, the Middle East. And I hate to say it, but they don't have, they don't really care if they lose a life or two, and they need the transportation more than they do the regulatory issues.
Okay, here's a great question from Ron Dalforce, co-founder of Jet Transaction, another veteran aircraft broker. Do you feel the recent Blue Book drops are founded in reality? Ex-G650 values have dropped close to 25% in 12 months, while inventory has only gone from approximately 7% to 8.2%. In 2009, 2010, values did not drop that much when inventory rose to more than 13%.
To tell you the truth, I never look at the Blue Book.
Or other guides.
I really, listen, like Bob was saying, the guys in the brokerage business, I could tell you, forget in 24 hours, I could tell you in 24 seconds what your airplane's worth within 5%. There's a couple of key questions we ask, and we could tell you what the market is today. It might not be the same thing next week. It might not be next month. And it definitely last month it was different. So it's a very fluid market, and each model is more fluid than another model. So it's really hard to just give a blanket answer to that question.
Okay.
Question. Can I add one thing?
Yeah, Jay, please.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with the reporting guides, and I'm glad they're there, I don't use them for that. I use them for other pieces of information based on serial numbers. But sometimes when you see big drops like that, it's because they were priced incorrectly, and they're just trying to create the right price, and so they make huge drops. And it isn't necessarily indicative of COVID in the last 12 months or indicative of where prices really are. It's because they were probably priced incorrectly in the books preceding them.
And also the problem is you look at the two different books, and you look at one ultra long range airplane, and you look at it in two different books, and there's a $2 or $3 million difference. How's that possible? It's not credible. And of course, you use the one that's more favorable to the person you're talking to, but it's not fair to do that. And you really just got to look at the market and see what's moving and what somebody's going to, what somebody's going to pay for it.
Okay, we've got so many questions. I'm struggling to get through them. Do any of the other panelists want to ask anyone else a question? While you're deciding, Rich Berkemeyer has asked how CGI Miami is doing next week, virtual, which is why there won't be a town hall. More than 500 people already registered, but you can still register now if you want to for CGI Americas next week. Right, who's got a question?
I've got a question for Steve and Jay. You both mentioned that corporate flight department activity in terms of purchases are down. But I'm starting to hear from some of my corporate flight department clients that they're going to see access to their aircraft with people that have never flown in the corporate jet before, concern with health and safety, the inability of the commercial airline schedule to really get people where they need to be in an efficient manner. Do you see that as a possible boost to the corporate side of things, that there'll be more access going forward?
I think that it's going to be here and gone before you know it, and I don't really think that's going to be as big an issue as you think. I do think that the corporate flying will come back pretty quick when we get the vaccine out, which is obviously you have a couple of them coming in the next couple months. So I think you're going to see a combination of things. I think you're going to see the fractionals, the charter, the flex jets, the charter markets and things like that are going to see a boost, because you have a lot of people that came into the charter market that were never charter people before, and they don't have enough need to buy an airplane, so go buy a fractional, and that sort of goes back to where we started with NetJets back 40 years ago, where they got them into the market and they grow and to be buyers. So I really think that's more of what we're going to see. I don't think it's going to be people asking so many questions. It's so easy now to put a spray into the airplane and certify that the airplane's been COVID cleaned.
Jay?
Well, I think that anything, of course, that creates use is going to be good for us. I haven't heard a lot of talk yet, Ed, from people downline from where Access has been corporately talk about opening that up. I think, though, that flight departments are standing by. They're standing in their offices. They're waiting to get the go-ahead to be able to get their planes back in the air. And so I think we will see, as Steve says, as we find some solutions to more safe travel around the world, you're going to see these airplanes up and out and flying again. Whether or not they fly more because they create more access downline in the company, I don't know. I'm just looking forward to that segment coming back.
I mean, listen, now, I would say, that forecasters right now should probably get in the unemployment line with pollsters. I think, there's no reason to, you can't give a forecast right now. I mean, I don't know who invented a pollster's job anyway, maybe the National Weathermen Association. It's impossible to think what's going to happen, but I do think you're going to see a surge in the first or second quarter of interest because of just the vaccines coming out. But I do think we have to really be aware that in the later in the second quarter and third quarter, everybody's going to have the realization of how this unemployment and furloughed people are going to stop getting their benefits, and I don't know how many of them are going to wake up and see they don't have jobs anymore. So that's a concern that going down the line, what we have to look at.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much to all of our fantastic panelists. Thanks so much to Tim Obitz, Ed Camera, Bob Zostin, Jay Messenger, and Steve Asano. If you'd like to stay on and